Hi, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the December Power Ahead Colorado Oversight Committee meeting. I would like to call this meeting to order. The time now is 10:03 in the morning, Friday. And before we get into everything, I do want to wish everybody happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, etc. And with that, we will move into the agenda. We do not have any action items. Yep, thank you for the heart there, Emily. We do not have any action items today. This is merely going to be more informational in nature. But before we move into that, I would like to open up the forum for any public commentary on anything on today's agenda. Are there any members of the public who would like to make any comments? Okay, I do not see any hands, so I'm going to assume that there are no interested parties willing to say anything, so we will now close the public comment period. Third item on the agenda is our Oversight Committee summary. This is meeting minutes, and I would just ask members of the Oversight Committee to review that. And if you have any additions, changes, or edits, please pass them along to Cam Kennedy. With that, we will transition now into the discussion items. We have one item for presentation today, and I believe this is going to be given by, and I will ask for forgiveness in advance, Mac Prather. Hopefully I'm pronouncing his name correctly, who will give us some discussions about the low-income community pilot grant program. So please take that away. Mr. Prather.
Thank you, Chair Kondo. Good morning, everyone. This is Mac Prather, Program Manager with Powerhead Colorado. And just a slight correction to the agenda, Mr. Chair, we're actually talking about our Innovation Grant Program. So we do have a low-income household program. That's a $47 million program. We'll talk about that shortly in the new year. But today we'll be focused on the Innovation Small Grant Program. And I do want to kind of pause and differentiate a little bit. I think at our last meeting, Greg presented out to you all on our jurisdictional subawards. Those are small grants going to individual jurisdictions for staff. This is another and separate small grant program, which is really to address market barriers for businesses. And we are very lucky to have Desmond Kiwan here from VEIC, our consultant for this program. He's going to tell you all much more about this. And yes, it is an informational presentation, but we also would like your engagement. This is really the best chance to give us feedback directionally on this program. So we're in the midst of doing a lot of work. It's very important that we hear from you all today with your questions, your feedback, and your direction. So thank you for that, and I'll hand it over to Desmond.
Great. Thank you so much, Mac. I'll just start sharing my screen here. All right, hopefully that looks good for everyone. First and foremost, thank you all for allowing me to join you today and discuss more about the Innovation Pilot Program. I'll give you some updates on where we stand, but really what I want to focus on today and what we'll discuss is the process behind the program itself, so we can have a common understanding of an alignment on how we're going about this. So first, a little context for who you're talking to today. Like Max said, my name is Desmond Kerwin. I'm going to be the project lead for this program at VEIC. I've worked with my organization for about 5 years. I'm a senior consultant. I've worked on the Tech Clean California program, overseeing the Quick Start grants there that this innovation pilot program was modeled after. And before all of that, I was studying at the University of Michigan Environment and Sustainability, focused on behavior education, communication, and working in their environmental psychology research lab. Why I mention that is because all of that work really amounts to understanding what the conditions are under which we can support people in acting for the betterment of themselves and society, which I think very much aligns with the work we're doing here and also the broader work that DRCOG is championing. And then a little bit about my organization as well, VEIC. We're a nonprofit with a mission just to make an impact in service of both the people and the planet itself. VEIC is an acronym. It stands for Vermont Energy Investment Corporation because we started off in Vermont, launching the nation's first energy efficiency utility in Efficiency Vermont. But we've since expanded for a broader nationwide focus. So the acronym is very much our name. It's just the letters there. So you don't have to get caught up in that. Like I said, we have about 40 states that we've done work in so far, Colorado being one of them. We also have, like I said, worked in energy efficiency, but also clean transportation, building decarbonization, working to support a clean and flexible grid, and a lot of diversity of talent and knowledge that is embedded within our organization, which is really meaningful in the context of the innovation program because that means I have a lot of people that I can go to with a variety of expertise to help support these pilot projects that we award, which is a point that I'll emphasize many times throughout this conversation today, is that we're not just awarding pilot programs and pilot projects and stepping away waiting for reporting, but really operating this program so that we are collaborative partners and building this mutual understanding and really uplifting these voices as much as we can to make them very much a program participant as much as they are willing actors in the market well beyond our terms of funding. All right, so the majority of conversation today will be about the strategy and process behind the program. We'll have some time for discussion toward the end. I've got a list of questions that I believe Cam had sent out in advance of this call. And so we'll go through those, but I do also encourage you all as I'm going through, jot down any questions that come up, any ideas or connections that are sparked by what I'm saying. I do want to make sure that we have time to visit those if they feel warranted as we go through here. But to kick things off, I'm going to start all the way at the beginning from some language from the RFP for the Innovation Pilot Program and really lean into these 2 points that are bolded here and what we're doing. We're looking to test approaches that are overcoming market barriers, meaning that we're looking to dive deep, get to the root causes, and understand how to untangle those so that we're proposing solutions and scaling solutions that are most effective, that really address why they haven't worked, why building electrification has not been the prominent way the market has operated to date, and how we can do better by the people and communities that we serve. Which leads very much into this next bolded point of developing and refining strategies and a variety of interventions that can be scaled into regional solutions, statewide, even national focus. Again, understanding that from the forefront of when we award these projects to know what is the space in which that they can scale, what does scaling look like, what's the strategy behind that. And so that leads us into a little bit about the program itself. What is the mechanisms that we're looking at here? Sorry, my screen is messed up for a second there. So to focus us in here, we've got these 2 questions that I have on the left side of what makes an innovation truly capable of transforming a market rather than just improving it. We're not looking to just make the small incremental changes or improvements that operate in isolation. We're trying to look at this from a broader perspective of how are we actually fundamentally altering market structures. And the other thing too is that we have about $4 million to award in grant funding. We're looking to award up to 25 projects or so across 3 different rounds with an average of about $200,000 per project. And so that is a pretty small scale. So how can we take those small scale pilots and then lead up to the system-wide change that we're hoping to affect and how we're actually, again, transforming the market to electrify our buildings? So this program really in and of itself is that model for transformation. We're trying to invest in the untested and unknown ideas to figure out what we can do better, what we haven't tried before. We also have to build this infrastructure around the market and find those supports. So when we're talking about this grant program, we're not looking at just the funding we provide to organizations, but how are we actually developing the business case and how are we actually strengthening their ability and capacity to participate in building electrification beyond the bounds of what Powerhead Colorado funding looks like. And with that, we're also looking to inform and scale within the Powerhead Colorado initiatives, activities across vendors. So understanding what each aspect is supposed to address and finding ways that we can build upon that run in parallel, really strengthen this network that we have through this program so that we are informing each other, that we're able to transfer ideas and knowledge in real time as they're applicable, so that we're making the most of these novel ideas that we're testing. All right, so when I'm saying all of this, what it ends up looking like, we've got a few conditions to acknowledge up front is that we have these large top-down investments like Powerhead Colorado that send clear and consistent signals. So when we have this influx of funding, it sends a signal that the market is shifting. And so in theory, that will then motivate various actors, contractors, organizations to incorporate the products and services that we are funding into their routine operations. And at the same time, we have to also understand that achieving this level of retrofit, looking deep into the buildings and significantly curtailing buildings' energy use, facilitating the switch from fossil energy to electric alternatives, all the while managing grid strain, requires a new set of tools at our disposal. And what we've seen is that the existing mechanisms that we have are insufficient to really address some of these prominent barriers to participation and risk deepening the divide that we see between those that can participate and those that face barriers. So at the top, I've mapped out some of these very high-level general barriers that we know we're facing when talking about building electrification and beneficial electrification. Is that we have low interest and awareness, we have low perceived value of these technologies and services, we have gaps in workforce, whether that's training or even just service availability, and then policies that may not be representative of the goals or the conditions that the market faces right now. So when we look at these things in combination of one another, it's really hard, or if not impossible, to just address one, right? You can't just get in and address the workforce gaps and assume that the rest of the barriers will be resolved. And so that's when we're talking about market transformation, it's talking about an approach that addresses all of these things, all of these conditions holistically, so that we can have a new way of looking at things. And so what this brings us to is asking the question of if we need to support innovation and also support equitable market transformation, what are the conditions for success here? And this gets us starting to think beyond just the financial component of incentives and reducing upfront costs to looking at these categories here of what we look to address through the pilots. So when I'm talking about uncovering innovation, this is really for us to challenge what assumptions we're making of what the solutions are and design solutions that really address the root causes of problems and not just the symptoms. We also need to reach communities where they're at. This journey of electrification is going to look different depending on who you're working with, where they're located, and we need to acknowledge those differences and work within them rather than assume or force these communities to come up to speed to where we're at and assume that as a new baseline. We also, again, coming back to what I said earlier, we have to build this capacity so that our efforts are sustained after this funding is exhausted. We have to make sure that we have this correct understanding of market barriers so that what works in theory is working in practice. And so when we've been looking at these different conditions, what we've really narrowed it down to is just being able to seek external voices to define the problems and contribute to solutions, which boils down to these procedural equity best practices. So we have to ask ourselves, are we designing our grant program in ways that allow better access to this funding, making it easier for people to qualify and apply for the funding itself so that we have a diversity of ideas? And then are we elevating what we learn from these non-traditional voices or organizations that have been marginalized and integrating their insights and lessons into our program design itself? And so this all ties back into that question of how do we bridge the gap between innovation and equity, is bringing the external voices into our program design, soliciting their ideas based on what barriers we're seeing, and trying to test out their solutions based on the conditions that they're working in. And so another definition that I'll emphasize here is what innovation is and how we're conceptualizing it with this program is that it's the improved products, services, processes, or strategies that are driving measurable progress toward our goal of less emissions in our buildings. And so I want to acknowledge this as just having a common understanding that I'm not just talking about deployment of new technologies or emerging technologies when I say innovation. It's something that can be managed. We can support innovation, and we can really nurture this process of innovation to bring these novel ideas and processes and strategies to scale. And so I borrowed this framework visual here from what's called the Open Book of Social Innovation. Why I gravitated towards social innovation is because this resource acknowledges that it's all about the many ways in which people are creating new and more effective answers to the biggest challenges of our times, which sounds word for word what we're trying to accomplish here. What we have in front of us, the existing structures and policies that we have not resolved some of these really burdensome and intractable social issues like climate change, like energy and home affordability, or health disparities. The market by itself doesn't have the incentive to address or solve these issues, nor does it have the appropriate means to do so. And the policies often tend to reinforce existing models rather than build new ones from scratch. It's, again, just not designed to address things in this way. So when we're thinking about tackling complex problems that cross sectors, operating in silos is a recipe for stagnation. So this program is intended to bridge that gap between these two worlds of the market and policies, aiming for both top-down and bottom-up strategies to operate in unison. So when I'm saying that, we have to start to think in systems about the outcomes and relationships between the solutions themselves. So I'll walk through each of these different points here and relate it back to the program and our strategy. So first, foremost, is prompts, is the barriers. What are the actual problems we're addressing? Again, are we designing solutions for symptoms of the causes of a particular problem, or are we getting to that root cause? So when we're thinking about emissions reduction, the path there to clean and clean energy buildings, no emissions in our buildings, it can seem straightforward, like we have this path, we have this goal of zero emissions by 2050 or whatever the ultimate goal and timeline is. That can feel linear at first, but really when we start to parse this out, it's really this complex net. And we have to try to find these strategic intervention points to unlock the friction within that and untangle the complexities that we have here. So the key to start things off is to frame the question in the right way, coming from those that are most impacted. So start off by doing a lot of market research around what the barriers are specific to the region. And then we go take those barriers around to the people that we're trying to reach, get their input. Are these the problems that are actually most prominent? Test our assumptions, challenge ourselves to make sure that we are designing things in the ways that will work for the communities within this region, for the participants, whether it's homeowners or the contractors alike, even all the way up to the utilities and regulations. So we have to understand what the dynamics are that we're working within. And so then once we have the right questions, we have to look at proposals. So when we're building the solicitation, one thing that I'll point out and just to clarify is that we're not releasing a solicitation for these grant projects that has this sort of pre-packaged idea for someone to implement and run. We're seeking, again, these ideas at these strategic intervention points. So we'll come up with a list of priority areas of investments and then ask the market to propose solutions around that. And then we award what feels the most compelling and the most solvable in the timeline that we have. So as we're going through this, we again come back to those questions of how do we ensure this process is accessible and equitable? We make sure that we're reaching grassroots organizations and organizations that don't typically have access to this type of funding by bringing them to the table early on, asking the right questions of making sure we're speaking the same language and that our intake forms and application forms are all accessible. And also defining what's in it for them. How do we support this business model around innovation so that they can continue to contribute? And then we get into the actual prototypes, the testing things out of the pilot stage themselves. Coming back to checking our assumptions. The solicitations, again, are designed for this community-driven and industry-driven input. It's through this iteration and trial and error where we start to build more of these coalitions and have these strength building exercises so that we are actually resolving conflicts in the way that makes sense for the market to resolve. And so through this process, when we're awarding and working with grantees, we are able to define what success looks like. What change do we expect to make through this pilot? how will we see this change and why does it matter for the future of beneficial electrification? When we get into sustaining, it's really about when we look back and ask if the pilot met this vision for success, and specifically what parts and how. Was it sufficiently effective and also cost effective? Are we reliant on special talents of few individuals? This is where the evaluation is really critical to avoid keeping too many ideas alive that may not need the resources. And we want to identify the best ones and direct resources there rather than sustaining a bunch of different ideas, disparate ideas that aren't having and generating the effects that we had hoped to. So again, from the start, we're identifying these pathways to scale, understanding what is the conditions that they're working within, and then working toward that end outcome with this common vision of success in mind. Which leads us to really the fun part of this work is looking at all of that together. And when I'm talking about scaling, again, this is something that I want to make sure that we have common alignment and understanding on, because where this term comes from, and I see it most used, is in manufacturing, where we have the expansion of the idea or concept through standardization and economies of scale, scaling up in a sense. But when we're tackling social issues and transforming markets, it commonly involves scaling multiple different innovations related to a core problem in unison. And so that means we have to explore how projects can be iterated, built upon, and have a greater impact on the target population, problem, need, whatever it may be. And that's all identified through what is the space and what are the drivers, these enabling conditions of innovation. So when I say what's the space, I'm talking about what is the system in which things will grow? Is there economic demand for an innovation? Is the policy and regulatory framework supportive? Does the organization that has instituted it have the capacity? Are there right partnerships in place? Do we have the right funding and resources, perceptions around this concept to support its scalability? And then the drivers are the things that propel innovation and scaling forward. So like the thing itself being valuable, determining that successful vision, confirming impact through that evaluation, and also through external catalysts like incentives or like natural gas prices, things that influence but aren't directly involved with the actual innovation itself. And so through that, we actually identify what is the right pathway to scale. Maybe it is expansion and replication, or maybe it is targeted diffusion, placing the right ideas in front of the right people so that other organizations and entities can pick it up and run with it. Or maybe it's testing out new strategies based off of new barriers that emerge. So that's getting back into these nice arrows that I drew here of how these things are interrelated with one another. And then that comes back to my question that I posed at the beginning of how can we take these small scale pilots and cause systemic change? And really, it's not one pilot that's going to create this, but many small different interventions that are creating new ways of thinking and doing things. Again, coming back to that question, what are these conditions that make an innovation viable economically, socially, politically? We have to get solutions direct from the market source so that it's built in the market's vision, right? We don't want to add additional friction into the process by introducing solutions that don't fundamentally work with how the market operates. We, again, want to build capacity for lasting contributions so that we are making this a viable proposition for those that are participating in this. It's not just one and done funding. And we have to, again, understand the paradigm in which ideas can grow, those space and drivers. And finally, we have to just provide this forgiving space for trial and error. This is not something that you commonly come across with funding where failure is acceptable, because when we're talking about testing unknown things, what that can really be reframed as is a learning moment. If we're adaptive, nimble, and responsive with this program, we're able to adjust the way that pilots operate and find new ways around barriers that are understandably emerging as we're looking into things we haven't done before. So all of this ends up feeding right back into uncovering innovation, reaching communities where they're at, building this capacity, and challenging our understanding of market barriers itself. And so that brings us to where we are today. What is the work we've been doing? So up until this point, like I mentioned, we have been doing a lot of market research, speaking with folks such as yourself, getting ideas and input on what we've put together. And all of this is leading into what we're designing for our selection criteria. What are the types of pilots that we'll invest in this first cohort in the springtime of 2026. And then each year around that time, we'll be releasing a solicitation with grant projects awarded sometime in the summer region timeline there. A little bit of a closer look into what this looks like leading into the first cohort of grants. So like I said, we've got a lot of work going into the program design, the learning framework, defining our objectives. In the spring, we'll release this first solicitation. We'll have available information on how we'll evaluate these proposals. And then leading into the summer when we're actually awarding the projects themselves. And then in the fall, when implementation begins, working on these project plans and identifying that space for scalability and this scalability proposition. Throughout all of these different grant projects and in cohorts, we'll be performing routine reporting and evaluation, reporting out to DRCOG and to others, again, to identify those strategic points where we can place information and allow these ideas to start to grow naturally and with a little nudge here and there as well. So while we've been going through this cataloging of market barriers and opportunities, we've been mapping these different aspects of policy, the different programs, and the market barriers, all in all to amount to the priority focus areas that we'll come up with this first solicitation. And so while we're going through and kind of shopping these ideas around, like I said, we'll be doing it in a way that we're trying to tap into networks naturally. So performing these interviews, asking for additional contacts and information to really get into the depth of networks available so that we've got, again, a lot of voices contributing and providing input, which will catalog all of the information that we got, bundle it up into a nice, neat package for a solicitation and come out with this first set of priority areas for our first cohort of grants. At a very high level, these are some of the common barriers and potential solutions that we've started to narrow in on here. So I don't think any of these would come as a surprise to anyone, but we're dealing with things like workforce training, contractor readiness, the demand side of the equation, very much on the supply side too, access, affordability, customer education and outreach, working with households and homeowners. So we've got a lot of different dimensions here that we'll try to refine and work into what those priorities end up being. But we've added some examples here of what potential solutions that we might look to explore underneath these grant programs could be like. So I can bring this up again as we head into our discussion here. But yeah, just wanted to take a quick pause and acknowledge the input from previous calls that Mac had presented on this program and the input directly from you all in helping shape these priority investment areas. So I saw a lot of themes when I was pulling this together from the Oversight Committee and the Technical Committee and your responses there of a lot around like coalition building. How do we get many different diverse actors to work together about supply chain interventions so that the supply side can keep up with the rapid growth and demand of this region? And again, what's really great is seeing this theme of addressing root causes. How do we actually design things that are getting to the roots in changing systems so that we can have a flourishing market afterward? And so that brings us to our discussion here today. And we've got 18 participants on the call. Mac, I'm thinking we could actually, instead of doing breakout groups, I think we can just kind of keep this up as an open-ended full group session. So what I want here is just to dive a little deeper. I believe, again, that Cam had sent these out in advance for you to potentially think on a little bit more. And as Max said at the beginning of the call, this is really your chance to be able to help us shape the direction of this program and help inform what we're doing here. So we've got this list of questions here, and just we can work through them individually, or we can, if anyone has some immediate thoughts jumping out from these questions or things that came up as I was presenting, I'm happy to take a pause to clarify things as well right now. But yeah, Mac, anything to add before we hop into that there?
No, sounds perfect. We'll pause for questions. Desmond, also, if there are questions that are more important to you in design, we can highlight those too, but all sounds good.
Are there any questions from the directors or board members.
I
And
had a question.
yes, go ahead.
I saw on the slide, I think it was maybe 10 slides back about meeting community where they're at. I really appreciate that. Um, I'm just curious of how do you foresee that happening? Because I hear it a lot, but I think sometimes folks struggle to actually do it. So trying to see if is there a plan for that of reaching out to community and getting that feedback, because that's going to be important.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. So the first level I'll say is, Powerhead Colorado has this community engagement initiative that we'll be working in coordination with to make sure that what they're doing, remains in their domain, but we're able to aid in the ways that they're exploring community engagement. But in particular, why I bring that up is because what we found to be vastly effective is making sure that when we're talking about reaching communities, we have community-based organizations embedded within the implementation team. So not just, when we're going through the evaluation of proposals, not just looking at the indirect effects, right, of like bringing down costs can help, lower income communities. And then by doing this intervention, we bring down costs and can assume that that would be the case. But when we're talking about equity and reaching communities, we want to understand the direct effects. So how are you working with these communities? How are you doing it authentically so that you are understanding what their actual conditions are and their lived experiences? And much of that comes through just what the expertise that CBOs bring to the table is. So that's one way, is just depending on the local knowledge and resources that we have at our disposal in this region. Another way is this sort of separating out of these two dichotomies of projects, so to speak, is that we have these very kind of quick, clean, easy, understandable projects that are from our Tech Clean California program. As an example, is the heat pump water heater loaner model, rate of when households are facing emergency replacement situations, they need something quick so that they can have the water service restored in a reasonable amount of time. And so the loaner model just came in, provided a loaner gas system while the more complex heat pump water heater system was installed. It was very effective. It increased the conversion rates for this particular plumbing organization by at one point up to 52% of customers were converting to heat pump water heaters versus 1% from baseline conditions. So we've got those sort of projects that are very clean cut and easy to do. Whereas we have this whole other side of the equation of more of the intentional, slow community building aspects of these projects that we have to understand that they're not going to result in rapid deployment, but it helps us build our understanding and knowledge of what it means to authentically work with these communities. What are the nuances of the barriers that they face? So we're not just assuming blanket strategies can work for all, or just trying to apply things at too high of a level. And so that separating that out kind of helps us with our evaluation of these projects, as well as understanding the impacts that they're intended to create and not limiting it to one or the other, because we want to make sure that we are spurring rapid market deployment so that there are these business models and conditions that are being created over here while we're working within these communities to build their capacity and recognize, this industry has been siloed. There's been barriers to access to it. And so there's a lot of building that needs to be done, and repairing and building trust is the biggest thing, is ensuring that these communities feel comfortable with participating in this transition. So while that's going on, building the systems and structures in these communities, and then we've got the rapid economic development and market conditions building in more of the general market, we're able to bring these two things together so that they have a on-ramp to rapidly adopting these technologies once the conditions are right for them. So I kind of feel like I talked around it in a lot of ways, but
You did, you did. You said exactly what I needed to hear.
okay, great. And Chris, I see your hand is up too.
Yeah, thanks, Desmond. Just a couple things. It's so great to have VEIC on board. They have a really robust understanding of how community engagement dovetails with this kind of work and
That's awesome.
how vital it really is. And Dr. Walker Ravenel, you and I have discussed this before. I And I want to reiterate the importance of your question because I think that the phrase meeting people where they are is important. I think it also can kind of, and this is not VEIC's intent, but I have seen it before in other instances where it can fall into a check the box exercise. I think many of us on
Exactly.
this call have seen that, right? And that can definitely get in the way of meaningful, transparent, robust community engagement. So, really quickly, I just want to let the group know that just yesterday we had our kickoff meeting with Kearns and West, who is our selected community engagement consultant. They are committed to working with us, our consultant partners, and also Excel's Partners in Energy group to make sure that we have a really well thought out approach, particularly as it pertains to stakeholder and audience mapping, because we can't reach the folks we need to reach without this pre work. And Black Parents United Foundation is definitely on that list. We have a really long and growing list of community based organizations and other entities that are going to be able to help us, I think, do this meaningful work as it pertains to community engagement. So I wanted to reiterate as the program manager who is ultimately kind of overseeing comms and community engagement that we understand that question, we take it to heart. And I think I really feel confident in saying that we're doing our absolute utmost to make sure that we um, mean what we say when we say we're meeting people where they are. So I hope that helps a little bit too.
As always, Chris, I love when you share that piece. I think those are some of the pieces that I want to make sure I convey over to the folks that we serve, because we serve a lot of community members in 3 cities. And just because a lot of the jurisdictions have changed, I wanted to make sure that community is still being heard and they can still trust at least CBOs. And I know when the RFPs rolls out for the community engagement pieces, and I know that you guys have already solidified like the lead, but I know that CBOs are always going to be the face. So that part is going to be really important for us because I know that whatever we say, the community does not take that with a grain of salt. They believe it, and I want to make sure that we show up for them. And it's gonna be us asking those questions to make sure that we're not signing up for something that's not what it really is. But because you share that and you've been sharing that from the beginning, Chris, I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Are there any other board members with questions? I would like to ask a question, and as I sit here and I think about it, and I don't want to take credit for this. I believe Director Spears said this at our last meeting, and that is, this whole thing of building trust into something that's new. It sounds like we really have to have some sort of pilot demonstrator model that makes it real for people so that they understand what it looks, feels, smells like, all of those things, to help build that confidence. So I'm assuming that that is part of the scope of what we're trying to do here is really change mindsets and thinking. But my other challenge that I sit here when I listen to this is, okay, so you're going to pilot a number of initiatives. And at some point or another, you're trying to strike a balance, because if you're trying to scale up, at some point you will want to down select to something that is a few things that are easily replicatable. Because when you describe design for manufacturability, if you're going to make a whole bunch of widgets, you want to do that to the same product specification. And if you have umpteen number of product specification, it's going to be hard to scale up and to reach the broader market. So I wonder if you can speak to that challenge of trying to hit a balance between both of those.
I'll let Matt go first and I'll chime in as well.
Yeah, no, Desmond, I'd love to hear your response to that and maybe a little bit from the California work. Just a little bit of context, I think, Chair Kondo, we had a conversation at the last meeting about the possibility to do some demonstration projects either in a community building or house of worship or something like a home tour, to give people more of a tactile kind of experience of heat pumps and that technology. Is that what you're referencing, Mr. Chair? Okay, thank you. Just context for you, Desmond, but we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll address that other point first of, when we're refining in how are we supporting scale of these initiatives. So I'll tie all the way back to what I had said at the beginning of what the EIC as an organization is that I have a vast amount of resources at my disposal to understand when we're thinking about technologies, the technical aspects of things. We also do a lot of work with community engagement, working within policy and system structures. And so I bring that up because that means I'm able to tap into that knowledge, to that network, and really understand what are the ways in which we can scale, because it could be replication, but I think the really important part of this program, what makes it unique, is again acting in partnership with these grantees. So in some respects, we will be supporting ongoing ideas, replication of ideas, and others, those might be facilitated through those opportunities that we identify at the forefront. So if there are certain stakeholders that we know, with this Barnett plumbing loaner model from California, we knew that there are certain types of programs and certain types of organizations that can benefit from that. And so we publicize what their lessons are. We have these conversations with these programs and entities and make sure that they understand what are the ways in which that you can adopt this model, what did we learn from implementation. And so that started to exist. It has its own sort of momentum outside of the bounds of the program. And so it allows for that sort of warm handoff into these other areas. Again, there's going to be these opportunities in which we might be seeing, okay, well, these pilots uncovered something new. We want to validate what we learned from them, or there's different barriers that we have to continue testing, or maybe there's policy and regulatory barriers that we have to highlight and as what the implications are if we don't change the ways that we operate from the top down. And so coming back to it all, again, the way in which we're viewing scaling is through these diverse set of strategies, whether it's scaling up in the manufacturing sense, scaling outward and understanding what are the systems and structures that things operate in, what are the policy conditions, and then also scaling deep, understanding the cultural and social ties to what it means to adopt these innovations. But as on the other side of things too, as Mac was noting with the way in which this equipment can be visible for communities, there's some great work being done by folks out at University of California, Davis, UC Davis, that is exploring these dimensions of looking back at the diffusion of innovation theory of what are the characteristics of technologies that allow for adoption that people are interested in and spurs them, and looking at things like the electric vehicles, solar panels, that sort of thing. A couple of key things that building equipment is missing is trialability and observability, right? You can't test out a new water heater. You can't test out a new HVAC system. You can take a car for a test drive, see how it feels. And observability, you can see your neighbors with their new cars or the solar panels and understand like people are adopting this, whereas you're not going into people's basements or garages and seeing, the inner workings of their homes. And so we've got some real barriers in that sense of where these technologies can be highlighted for their benefits, and looking at innovative ways through like houses of worship or community centers, giving people the ability to interact and address what might be the perceived connotations with electrification broadly. It might be viewed negatively in some respects. And so overcoming that as a barrier too through these more public demonstrations. And this ties right back into how we're meeting communities where they're at. We're understanding the conditions they're operating with and then bending to that rather than the other way around.
Gotcha. Yeah, the only other thing that I'll add at the tail end is as I was listening to you, I was thinking about Malcolm Gladwell and the tipping point, but I'm not going to thumbnail that. But those were the things that were swirling around my head. Director Douglas, Mayor Douglas, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Kondo. I appreciate the presentation and all, and looking at especially areas that are most vulnerable to our industry here in Commerce City, the southern portion. We have a very heavy industrial portion of our city that also has residents there. Older homes built back in the 40s, 50s, and they just don't have the capability of upgrading. Some homes have flat roofs. And so there is a few residents that are going right now with no heat in their home, no access to a hot water. So, and when it comes to electrification, it also has been put as because of our gas generation here in Colorado, as far as either drilling, fracking for the oil and gas, and then the electrification. And so you get this negative reaction of people online that electricity is bad if you go all electric. My bill went up, and so, but there are people who are in need of electrification, and just say the split mini pumps and all that. But then you also have homes that have gas stoves that are old, people can't afford. So maybe this program could help with induction ovens, stoves. So we have to look at the all aspects of bringing people into the new era as far as bringing their quality of life up in those areas. Okay, we do have a lot of churches in the area as well that serve the community and community-based organizations. So, and those usually are places people go to get information. So we want to make sure when this information gets out, it's correct. People can actually feel that it's in layman's terms and they can understand it. And that, like you said, a demonstration, you can go someplace to go get a card, maybe go to Home Depot or Lowe's and see an induction oven. But to know how those things work, that's a whole different thing, right? Mini splits. It may be great for someone to have it just in their room, because sometimes people these homes where I'm talking about are very small spaces. And usually a family room is usually the gathering area. And the room will be a place to sleep. So it's going to be very interesting how this rolls out. But just to make sure we are the touch points, the people who are in need, because disproportionately affected areas of Commerce City, it's bigger than people think. So hopefully with this, and then we also have industry too. We have recycling industries that are behind there and in that area. So a lot of things that are happening with the exposure of the particulates that are in the air, and it affects people's health. So, with this decarbonization, there's buildings that are coming in and being built the right way, because you have people who will enter a building that's been, I'd say, meets a certain demand as far as LEED. But we have so many old buildings that people walk in and walk out with the same air quality. They just don't, it doesn't change, right? That affects their daily health and mental health throughout the day. So I'm looking forward to see how this could come together within folks who live within the non-attainment area of Commerce City. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. A lot of great points that I'll just respond to quickly. And then Emily, I see your hand is up. But I think you did a great job of representing what this web of complexities is. Again, it's not a linear way forward, but there's a lot of these different ways in which we might be able to find that strategic point of intervention. And you mentioned induction stoves. So, Mac and I have been discussing a lot about what is our purview for this innovation program. Where do we stop with what we can support? And what we've come up with is, Powerhead Colorado is all about market transformation, particularly for heat pump technologies, given their outsized benefits that they can provide toward reducing carbon emissions from buildings. And so if there's a compelling case that can be made for what other technologies or processes, strategies that achieve that end, then we can support it. So induction stoves, that's a great one of, when I mentioned the trialability and observability, I've heard of pilots that go around as I think they call it a chefluencer program of they went around with induction stoves and allowed community members in these community public facing places to test out, do some cooking, taste the food, and again, address that barrier of the perception of electric technologies of it can be good for you. It can be something that you would enjoy using. And especially, I think with induction stove tops, there is that really sort of novel aspect of it of, how quick they are to heat things. And again, tasting really good food off of it helps overcome that barrier of the perception of that technology and the cultural challenges that might be associated with that. I've also heard stories of people in similar housing conditions where they were using their gas ovens as a way to heat their home because they didn't have another alternative. And so giving that up was something that they were really tied to. And so understanding those nuances, understanding the ways that homeowners and people are interacting with the technologies in their home and not just assuming one sort of assumption based on whether or not they adopt electric technologies. Again, bending to them rather than expecting them to just come on board with what we're offering is really important. So yeah, I think there's a lot of great things that you just acknowledged there and a lot of ways in which this program can operate within and making sure that we're not forgetting people. I think, what it sums up to be for how we're working with this is do no harm, don't leave people in a worse off place than where they started, but also don't let perfect be the enemy of the good, right? We've got so much more to learn and grow that there's going to be different ways that success is really interpreted and determined. So I think there's a lot that we have room to work with there. Yeah, Emily, go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate. Can you guys hear me? I'm using headphones. I never use headphones.
You got it.
So I really appreciate this conversation. I think that this is there's so much thought into, creating this program and then actually making it work for the long term. So I appreciate Mayor Douglas's points about his community. I've been at tables at the AQCC and the APCD with a lot of community members from Commerce City and right around Suncor. And something I recognize is that there's a lot of trust building and hurdles to jump over there. And all along the Front Range, honestly, but in his community in particular, because I've heard folks say that it feels like state-sponsored pollution, state-sponsored suffering, and so I think that we have that, or what they've experienced, living right around Suncor. So I think we have some sort of just perception that we need to get uncomfortable with and make eye contact with and really recognize, because that is a barrier that we'll be coming up against. And so we need to build that trust. And then something else I picked up in your slides was to make this a very long-term sustainable effort that goes beyond, the next year and 3 years. And so I think part of that is I'm curious about the affordability. I mean, we talk about the capital investment a lot of like installing an induction stove. And then we're hearing a ton. I feel like every conversation that I'm in lately kind of always involves the AI and data centers and building those and bringing those to the community. I've been in some conversations at the PUC. We were looking at, rate increases and just transition plan and all of that. And how do we ensure that we are actually making this affordable for people in the long term? So addressing the capital, but then also just the ongoing expense of beneficial electrification. I hope that we have we're looking towards that as well, so that we don't, bring this into communities like everyone is all electric and then in 5 years they can't afford electricity. So anyway, just some thoughts there.
Yeah, great points. And there's this very fine line that we have to balance here of we don't want to jump the gun and have electric technologies be introduced in homes that are going to increase their expenses, especially in homes that can't afford that to begin with. But at the same time, if we're encouraging this market adoption of transitioning from gas to electric in homes that have the means and resources, as that proportion increases, more and more the burden of bearing the financing of the gas infrastructure is going to be on those exact same households. And so it is not something that is easily addressable. And I think, not something that holistically this program is going to be able to attack in one pilot. But I think, again, the cumulative effects, the number of lessons and insights that we'll learn from doing this on the ground work can help inform the broader strategies around that will have a lot of real on the ground data and insights that we'll be able to pull from in ways that much of the time these decisions from the policy side have not had the benefit of considering. And so I think there's a lot of the challenges that we've been up against in the past that we may be able to address in new ways in the future, particularly from how we design these next era of affordable rates and making sure that all are able to participate and we're not causing undue burden on any home from any which direction, because that's, again, a really fine line to walk.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think I wonder maybe if there's opportunity for us to engage in conversation, around rate studies or at the PUC, or I don't even know exactly what avenues, but if we can help to, just guide perspective of here's what we're trying to do and how can, the Excel or anyone else help to ensure that this is a priority moving forward. I know they're at the table and they're part of this whole process, but I just can see all the spider web of how it's all connected. So
yeah, and for what it's worth, Mac and Robert, maybe you can add in here, but I do think there's this other initiative with policy research and advisement that is underway of identifying the award there, maybe is already identified. But I think it's to that exact end of how can we use data-driven policy making, and I'm assuming rates might be wrapped up in as well. Nicole, just want to give some time. I know we're at time here. I don't know if I have permission to be able to go over it by a couple minutes, but would appreciate to hear what you have to say, Nicole, if I can.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I just wanted to say how much I appreciate all this thinking about innovation and doing it in such a systematic way. It's clear that you're very thoughtfully considering all the barriers to innovation. I think that's going to lead to more success because of it. I really appreciate seeing the intentionality and inclusivity and making sure that we're bringing in a lot of different people to this conversation and program. I think that's another thing that's really going to increase the success of it. It's just another example of all the really great work that you're doing. And it's an excellent model too of how to create regional innovation. So I just wanted to note all those things and just say thank you for how intentional all of this work is.
Well, thank you very much. I always love to leave on a compliment, so I'll transition now. These are all questions that, again, we'll be doing stakeholder outreach around. So if you have interest in discussing more, this is my contact information. Please do reach out. I'd love to have more conversations and maybe directly reaching out to you all if it makes sense. So again, thank you for the time. Be in touch and look forward to speaking with you all again soon, I'm sure.
Thank you, Desmond.
Bye.
If I could, Chair Khan, if I could close this out for 20 seconds. Just want to say thank you, Desmond. We're really appreciative of your team here. Again, the last comment touched on something really important, this connection of these projects with policy and program and long-term outcomes. So yes, we're doing that through that research that Greg is leading. But we also want to be doing that through this program where we're going to be doing pilots in the world and busting down these social technical barriers. So if you have more thoughts on what policies or how we might connect to them, we'd love to have it either in writing or you have Desmond's contact information. You can reach out directly to him or any of us. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I think we are complete with the discussion item for today. We'll transition to administrative. And the first item is any commentary from participants for the good of the order or the good of the Oversight Committee. I don't see any hands or anybody chiming in. I do have one, and that is that we do need to have a vice chair. So I will likely be reaching out to the DRCOG members to see if anyone is interested in serving as a backup. As I note that the next meeting that we're going to have is on January 9th, and I will actually be out of the country. So it will be important to have a vice chair to fill this role to MC the next meeting. But with that, are there any other? Oh, I see Robert Spots has his hand up. Go ahead, Robert.
Just to quickly note, agreed. Thank you, Director Kondo, for we do need a vice chair. We are strongly considering canceling the January meeting to give us all a holiday break, and we don't have anything too pressing. So we might have one more month to figure that out without Director Kondo.
Okay, very good. Either that or that gives me time to go and strong arm Nicole or Emily.
There you go.
Or, bribe them with lunch or dinner. Okay, very good. Again, as I opened, I do want to close on a positive note again as we enter into the holiday season. Want to wish everybody here on the PACO committee as well as DRCOG members happy holidays and felicity. I guess is probably the good word to use here. And we'll look forward to seeing you then in February.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays.
All righty.
Holidays, Merry
Happy
Christmas.
holidays.